Hi, and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast. Bonus episode, Conversation about Modern Masculinity with Dr. Simon Fokt episode. I am Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. In this bonus episode, you get to hear my conversation with philosopher, educator, and writer Dr. Simon Fokt. He is the founder of the Diversity Reading List and the creator of Man's Compass. He has a wealth of knowledge, and he's someone who, in his words, is trying to navigate the chaos of modern masculinity. We'll dive deep and get philosophical on you. So kick back and enjoy. You just might learn something. Welcome, Simon, to Men on the Path to Love.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Read a lot of your stuff and just really looking forward to having this conversation and digging in deep with your passion for modern masculinity and the changing role of men in society. The time is right for this, and I do a lot of storytelling in my show. And what I'd like to do before we get into all of your thoughts, Simon, is to tell us your story. Tell us how you got to this place where you're passionate about modern masculinity and whatnot. Tell us your story.
Sure, of course. Yes, I've been interested in the topics of gender for as long as I can remember. I could basically, as a kid, I could never kind of understand why is it that we treat boys and girls so differently. And I remember that, like, when I went to university and discovered feminism first, and I was told that it's all about, equality between men and women, I was just like, well, why wouldn't it be like that? Like, give me a good reason why not to. So it always seemed to me like the thing is that, like, we don't really have a good reason to not be equal. But the more I delved into it, the more I realized that actually the conversation is so often centered around women only, when with respect to this, or there's very little talk about the role that men should be playing. And I kind of really wished for quite a while that there was a similar conversation about masculinity as there is about women and femininity within the feminist movements. And I just thought that it's such a shame that basically women are spending all of this time rethinking how do their gender works, how do they express their gender, what does it even mean to be a woman? Should we question the ways in which society tells us are acceptable ways of being a woman or acceptable things for women to do,
Right.
are acceptable ways of expressing that gender. And then they are doing all of this work. They're having all of those discussions and they're coming up with some really excellent thoughts about this. And it's just a shame that men are not doing it.
Yeah.
Because for so long, it seems like men have kind of treated themselves as the default human. And so much of when feminists criticize men, it's very often they say, like, oh, we need to talk more about women because everyone talks about men all the time. So why should we need to talk about men? But we don't really talk about men. We talk about, like, men talk about themselves as if they were just generic humans. And they don't, when they talk about their own problems, they don't talk about their problems as men.
Right.
They don't really question what it is to be a man. They just talk about human problems. And then as I went on, I was involved in a whole bunch of various diversity projects. I'm an academic, I'm a philosopher, and in philosophy, as with many other academic disciplines, there's been a long discussion about how science and the academia in general has been dominated by white men and how we should do things to change this. So I was, very involved in a number of diversity projects that were aiming to increase the representation of groups that have been historically underrepresented. And that's all fantastic. But it seems like there's so many of those projects that are focused on finding new ways to allow people who are not men to express themselves. And that's absolutely fantastic. We should do all of that. But I think that there should also be a place for men to kind of rethink themselves as well. And this is what I would want to do in my work. I just feel like right now there isn't very much of it. And the stuff that there is tends to be quite problematic sometimes. It's very
Yeah.
much not focused on love, I'm afraid.
Right.
And I'd quite like to have a bit more of this discussion. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what we're doing right now is all part of that. And I'm
Mhm.
just grateful to have you here. I've talked a lot on my show about toxic masculinity. And
Mhm.
what is your take on that?
Right. I think that the term toxic masculinity has been so overused that it's quite difficult to talk about it right now because I think that so many guys, when they hear it, all they hear is just, oh my God, somebody's going to have a problem with me now.
Right.
To some extent, that's fair enough because I think that the term has been wildly overused and it has been basically a term of, how do we express that, yeah, you don't like something. Toxic masculinity is this kind of like umbrella catch-all phrase for all the stuff we don't like about men.
All the bad stuff.
Um,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't think that this is a useful way to use it. I wrote this kind of longer text about this at some point, looking into the actual origins of the term, which I don't know if probably many of your listeners would also know, but it actually was coined by men. It was coined within the mythopoetic men's movement of the
Mm.
80s.
Okay.
These were kind of men who wanted to escape from what they perceived as the kind of like alienating industrial society in which men, instead of having an opportunity to be themselves, they just need to work those really long jobs to bring the money home and kind of be a cog in the machine rather than really living a fulfilling life.
Right.
And one of the things that was lost, they said, in this kind of cog in the machine life was this connection to a healthy masculinity that men had to themselves. And they came up with this term, toxic masculinity, to express the way that men who are forced into this environment coped with this environment by kind of overdoing their masculinity, like being overly, I don't know, focused on just achievement or overly needing to express their dominance or like doing too much of the otherwise healthy masculine traits. And they were kind of like aiming to use this term to, just teach men to be better. It's just don't be like that.
Hmm.
Don't, hide away all of your emotions so that you can be a better cog in the machine,
Right.
but screw the machine, be a better you. And if that means that, yeah, you should be better with keeping in touch with, your own emotional states as well. And it wasn't until much later, like the term wasn't really used for a whole number of years. Basically, people kind of almost forgot that the term existed. And then it wasn't until the Me Too movement in 2015-16
Yeah.
that it exploded again.
Gonna
And
say.
now it was used very differently and it was used by very different people. And like while previously it was kind of a term that was used within a group of men for the sake of self-improvement,
Right.
now it became a term that was used between groups by one group to criticize another group, which I think is pretty problematic already. And I mean, you can understand why, and I think it's pretty clear like why the term was used the way it was. And there's a lot of very understandable impatience and anger among the people who have been mistreated or abused or otherwise harmed. And it's hard to expect them to, not be angry.
Of course.
But angry people end up, well, hurt people.
Can go
And
too
this,
far. Yeah.
exactly. So I think we're kind of like in this weird situation in which, on one hand, we could have this term be used by men to help each other to
Right.
improve themselves. But instead, right now, the term is mostly used to kind of like by one group to really criticize the other. And I was hoping that maybe there is some chance that we could reclaim it somehow
Hmm.
and just go like, okay, it's like there's something definitely valuable about using the term between groups because, there's nothing adds some urgency when somebody has a problem with you, right?
Right.
So like when something like when you only rely on self-regulation and expect people to do something out of the goodness of their hearts, you're gonna wait. It's
Yeah.
not gonna
Good,
happen
good luck with
tomorrow.
that, right?
Exactly, right?
Hmm.
But if someone from the outside comes in and says like, guys, not tomorrow, not in a week's time, today, we need to do something about this, that kind of adds this pressure that I think is needed. And I think that, I mean, let's be honest, I mentioned this metapoetic men's movement of the 80s. I mean, they just not done much, frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
for all the great theory and everything, I mean, we have exactly the same problems today as we did then. So, 45 years later, not much
Yeah.
change.
Well, and I
Um,
think too, change is hard and it's a process. It takes time and a lot of
yeah,
reinforcement. And if they
yeah,
weren't getting that, if we're not getting that, then yeah, it's going to kind of land flat.
absolutely. I think so. But I still think it's worth to come back to some of the ideas that they had in terms of what this whole toxicity can mean. And I think it's really useful for men specifically to kind of conceptualize it as just, it's kind of like too much of the good thing potentially. It's
Hmm.
like, I really like to, as a philosopher, I really like to think about this in terms of Aristotelian virtues. Aristotle had this theory that every virtue, every good way to be, is like a golden middle between two vices. So
Hmm.
if you're courageous, for example, that's a virtue. Like there's a vice of deficiency of courage, and that's just being cowardly. And then there is a vice of excess of courage, and that's just being, brazen, like just, I don't know, getting in trouble all the time. And I think that this is kind of like maps quite nicely on this whole idea of toxicity, because when you think like, what are the sort of things that we label like as toxic masculinity? It's just when you're, I don't know, so completely pushing away all of your emotions so that you're not like, completely unfazed by any of this. Like it's just like overdoing something, there's a good thing in the middle, and the good thing in the middle is just being in control of your own emotions, right? You can have this vice of deficiency in there, which is just like letting your emotions do anything they want to you.
Right.
But then, like being so in control that you never let anything slip or anything, that's just too much. And you're not letting anyone in and stuff like that. And similarly with other things, like with, I don't know, dominance or aggression or other things like that. I mean, some aggression is good. Like if someone threatens you, you should have the guts to defend yourself.
Yeah.
And, you should have the guts to take the risk when it makes sense, or to like even use violence when it's really justified and needed.
Yeah. When it has its place. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And you would also say like too little of it means that, well, you're craven and unable to act when you need to act. But
Right.
also too much of it, just like when you're, resolve every problem with violence or something like this, well, that is toxic, right? I think. And then I think that when we think about it this way and kind of think about this whole idea of toxicity as just too much, then we can also conceptualize it of like, okay. It's not that like I'm a horrible, evil person or something like that. No, I've just overdone something a bit.
Hmm.
Like there's a good thing in there. Like I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to, I don't know, be strong and protect my family or something like this, right? But
Yeah.
like I've
What
just
I'm,
I've just been overdoing it a bit.
what
Yeah.
I'm
No,
hearing you
no.
say is having that awareness and
Hmm.
okay, maybe I did take a step too far. So
Yeah.
maybe next time, hopefully I can learn from this so
Hmm.
that I don't do it the next time.
Exactly, right? I think that it's also really useful to think of yourself or of humans in general as this constant work in progress. Like
Absolutely.
we can always get better. It's a fantastic thing about humans. Some people are a bit, it seems like some people are a bit scared of it. Some people just want to, I don't know, like turn, I don't know, 30 or 25 or whatever else and go like, okay, I'm a finished human. I know who I am now. I can just sit and relax and just be me. And
Right.
that's it. But it just doesn't work like that. And it's really funny because there is some good psychology research on that topic. You know what they did? They asked people, how much do you think you have changed over the last 10 years?
Hmm.
And people go like, oh my God, I changed massively. I'm a completely different person now than I was 10 years ago. And then they asked them, okay, how much do you think you will change over the next 10 years? And most people go like, nah, I'm pretty much who I am right now. That's just it. That's just gonna be it.
Wow. Wow.
But the thing is that people answer the same way, regardless what age they are. So you ask like 30-year-olds this question, and they say like, nah, until I'm 40, I will not change at all. And then you ask 40-year-olds, and they go like, yeah, in the last 10 years, I changed massively. But in
Mm.
the next 10 years, I won't really change. And then you ask 50-year-olds, and they say exactly the same again. Yeah, people always kind of think like they already are who they are, but they never really are. People are always changing. But that's really fantastic. I think it's a good thing. And there's, again, like so much. Friedrich Nietzsche had this fantastic quote, is like life is about becoming who you are, he says. And basically becoming who you are is just like you have this idea of your, I don't know, some kind of your potential, your ideal self, something like that. And you're always overcoming who you are right now so that you can become this person you really actually want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic. And I think that potentially, also dealing with the fact that sometimes you are overdoing things in a way that some would label toxic or something like that. Well, that's a fantastic thing to improve, just be a better person.
Yeah. Another learning experience, and
Absolutely, yeah.
if we could see these so-called setbacks or failures or however you want to look at it as
Yeah.
an opportunity to learn from and grow, that's the
Hmm.
best we can do. And
Absolutely.
one of the techniques you mentioned that study, and one of the techniques I use with my clients sometimes is
Hmm.
looking back 5 years ago,
Yeah.
where were you then and where you are now? And that's where they actually see the progress,
Hmm.
versus what they're searching for. And then we go, okay, well, let's imagine five
Yeah.
years from now where you'd like to be.
Well, that's exactly it. I have to say, I recommend one thing. This is something I have been doing for myself, and I
Hmm.
would absolutely recommend it to any person, which is do rituals.
Yeah.
We as a society have completely forgotten about the power of rituals. I'm not a religious person. I am not particularly spiritual, but I do absolutely believe in the psychological and the social power of rituals. And I think that they are absolutely fantastic in helping us with exactly what you described right now, because so many changes in life happen very gradually. They happen very slowly.
Hmm.
Nothing changes from yesterday to today.
Exactly.
You know, you're still the same person. It's very difficult to see at which point something changes. And the kind of rituals of passage that our ancestors did, the kind of rituals of even the seasonal rituals, like the beginning of summer,
Right.
right,
Hmm.
are a fantastic time to kind of stop and give yourself this time to think like, okay, what did actually change over the last year? Now, how am I different from the last spring equinox or something like this, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you want to think of, like, I just did this ritual for myself. There's an old Slavic ritual in which you create a wicker figure of Marzanna, who is the winter goddess, and then you burn her and you drown her.
Ah.
And the idea is, yes, absolutely, it's pretty morbid. But the idea is that you are just like communicating that all of those things that were there in the winter, that are things of cold, of death, or things that you don't want to have with you anymore, they should just go away.
Yeah, it's
And
just
it's a
a
fun,
metaphor for releasing what's not serving you, that kind of thing. Yeah.
exactly, right? And
Mhm.
that is a fantastic moment to kind of stop and do exactly what you were saying a moment ago, what you do with your clients, which is to kind of force yourself to go, okay, what is it that I don't want? What is my intention for the next year? What
Mm.
are the things that I don't want to take with me anymore? And we still do some such rituals. You know, we do graduations, for example.
Mm.
Graduation is a perfect example because, you know, nothing changes from the day before you graduated to the day after you graduated. You're not suddenly
All the
smarter,
time.
right? No,
Hmm.
you have been getting smarter for the last 3 or 5 or however many years. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then because you have this one day, you go like, all right, I achieved something. I'm like, there is something new,
There's
right?
acknowledgement of that too. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that, yeah, like I say, our society kind of forgot how to do these sort of things. So I think that it's up to everyone to bring it back somehow themselves. I would very highly encourage people to do that.
Yeah, and I can see rituals too. And I did a whole episode on rituals and relationship. But
Hmm.
if it's a daily ritual, weekly ritual, monthly, quarter, whatever,
Yeah,
yearly, however you want to do it, but the more you do it, it reinforces that change that you're trying to make.
absolutely. I think so.
Yeah, we need that reinforcement over and over.
Yeah.
It's so easy to slip back into our old ways.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, my show's all about relationships. Just curious, some of your philosophy around modern day relationships. What would you want to say to men to get into relationships, how to perceive relationships, and so on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so many people and so many men are struggling with this these days.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
why I'm
that,
here.
thank you for being here. I think this is great. And thank you for helping so many men with this as well. I think it's fantastic to have this, like people need it.
Sure.
And I think like part of why people need it is because unfortunately a lot has changed when it comes to relationships over the last 50 years. And a lot of the kind of old scripts in which you just follow the script are just not there anymore. You know, people don't get married and at 20 have kids, at 22 have, 3.5 kids, a house and a dog, and that's it, right? And
Right, right.
never ask if this is what they ever wanted. No, people don't do that anymore. And, everyone is constantly on this mission to optimize how great their life is going to be. And
Mhm.
they constantly want to optimize their relationships as well. And that leads people to constantly ask, like, am I doing it right? Am I getting the best deal I could get? And all of the kind of commodification of love, which is happening with dating apps and things like this, is not helping because it's this kind of like shopping experience almost.
I just saw a
Mm.
thing recently on the news about, these scams that are going on with the dating apps and people
Hmm.
ruining people's lives because people trying to take advantage of another person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really shocking how people are trying to just monetize others' misery, frankly, and others' loneliness. It's just disgraceful. Um, I think that my advice to First of all, I just wanted to say that I want to acknowledge that it is genuinely hard, right? Because I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes people just go like, "Oh, what's your problem?" Just like, if you have a problem with that, something's wrong with you. It's
No.
like, no, it's genuinely hard.
Yes.
So first of all, guys, if you're struggling with this, like, don't be too hard on yourself. It is objectively difficult right now.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I'm also saying that from a perspective, maybe I should do a full disclosure. I'm saying that from a perspective of someone who has been very non-traditional when it comes to my relationships. I
Hmm.
have been in open relationships for quite a while, or in poly relationships. I had quite a lot of partners as well, and I moved to Berlin, where I'm part of this kind of very sex positive scene as well. I thought a lot about this, and I tried various kind of non-traditional ways of doing relationships. And I think what helped me the most in this whole thing was paradoxically not thinking so much about the relationship, but thinking more about myself.
Ah,
There's a fantastic book that I have read recently called Polysecure. It's kind of focused on open relationships, but it doesn't matter. And here it's really useful for anyone. The author's main thesis in there is that if you want to be positively and securely attached to your partner, you first need to learn to be securely attached to yourself.
that's
You
right.
first need to know what it is like to actually really feel good with yourself, to, appreciate yourself, to, give yourself grace, to give yourself the benefit of the doubt, to basically be nice to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy. And I think so many people right now, partially because they're experiencing some sort of setbacks in dating and other things, are just not very nice to themselves. They
Very
don't treat
hard.
themselves as well as they should. They don't sleep well enough, they don't exercise well enough, they don't eat well enough, they don't take care of themselves the way you should take care of a person you love. And
Yeah.
I think it's so important that we love ourselves first and learn how to do that before we can go out and try and find relationships and love others. And I think this is very closely connected. In practice, I think that the more you love yourself or the more you are, I know, secure in your own being, the more attractive you are. The more
Absolutely.
you seem like the sort of person others would want to be with. And like paradoxically, the less you focus on finding a relationship, and the more you focus on just being the kind of person that people would want to have relationships with, the
Yeah.
easier it will be for you to find a relationship. So I think that this is my top recommendation to any guys is just really focus on yourself, on being in tune with like actually really understanding what is it that you want. Again, it's like I will refer to ancient philosophy because it's just the best in this respect. Socrates had this fantastic line saying that you should know thyself
Right.
or that an unexamined life is not worth living. That's from Plato's The Apology, I think. And basically, the idea is that, well, we should stop and just think, why do we want the things we want? Why do we think the way we do?
Yeah.
What is it actually that I want, and what is it the stuff that kind of like society tells me I should want, or the guys are telling me I should want, or whatnot? How should I be with myself or with other people in a way that works for me and not necessarily for others? And I think that when you have this sort of awareness and you have like give yourself the, I don't know, attention and love, then you just become the sort of person that others want to be with.
Yeah. And I look back at my journey and, I've been through three divorces and,
Hmm.
learned a lot through the years. And there was a time where I had overlapped most of my relationships out of my own insecurities. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I was alone and I had a 27 room house at the time and a dog.
Oh, wow.
Everybody was
Hmm.
out of the house. And I was in the middle of my living room and just as alone as I'd ever been in my life. And that's where everything shifted to where I had to be okay with me and learn
Hmm.
self-compassion and really be okay by myself. And taking that time made all the difference in the world. A lot of what I do in my practice is based around self-compassion
Hmm.
because we're just not taught this, especially as men. And, and it's not a pity party. Woe is me. My life sucks. That's self-pity.
Hmm.
It's, I care about myself as I would someone that I would love and want in my life. And that's a process because
Absolutely.
it takes time and takes a lot of reinforcement because we're so used to being hard on ourselves, most of us.
I think that's totally right. And thank you so much for sharing this and for helping other men do that as well. And unfortunately, there's also kind of like almost a stigma. It's like, oh, you're just being so full of yourself or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
No, just be kind to yourself the way you would to another person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just that simple, yet it's hard, hard to
Hmm.
pull off, because
It
it's,
is, it is. And I think it's also maybe worth adding in there that you said being by yourself. And I think that many people associate that with loneliness.
no,
And loneliness is a very negatively charged term. But
right.
loneliness and being alone or solitude are two completely different things.
Yeah.
Like loneliness, you can be lonely in a crowd, you can be lonely at a massive party, and you still feel like you're just, alienated from everyone else. Loneliness is not the fact that you are one person in a room. Loneliness is in your head, is how connected do you feel to everything else. And loneliness also is about whether you chose it yourself or
Right.
not. If
Right.
you choose to be home on your own, read a fantastic book, make yourself a delightful dinner,
Mm.
and then, just feel great by yourself, or even just, sit and think about your life or whatever else, you've done it by choice. You've elected solitude and you have, spent this time on, I don't know, becoming a better person potentially.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are, wishing you were somewhere else and you're home on your own playing a computer game or whatever else, then you're lonely because you're not really spending this time on being with yourself. You're just distracting yourself constantly with something else. You're just kind of like using whatever it is, TV, computer, whatever else, just to not think about the fact that you're on your own. I would
Exactly.
very much recommend that people purposefully elect to be on their own for the sake of learning to just love themselves and be better with themselves.
Absolutely. This one thing I've said a lot is I'd rather be alone than feel alone in a relationship.
Ah, that is a perfect way to put it. Absolutely.
I'm okay. I'm okay with me. I just don't want to feel lonely when I'm with you. So Simon, I know you came up with this thing called man's compass. Can you tell us
Yes.
what that's all about?
Of course, right. So I've started blogging about masculinity about a year and a half ago. I've been kind of doing some academic work into this before, but I wanted to bring out the academic knowledge kind of out of the academia and actually talk to people a bit more. And I was thinking, how should I deliver this so that it just helps people as well, or maybe inspires people to be better? And I came up with this idea of the man's compass. And the idea of the compass is that we are objectively thrown into this pretty chaotic world right now in which everything seems to change a lot, in which we have been handed scripts about how to be, what to do, and all that. And then we do those things, and everyone tells us that we're doing it wrong.
Right.
And everyone keeps telling us that everyone keeps telling us what not to do, but hardly anyone ever tells us what to do.
Exactly.
Um,
Right.
and everyone seems to like it. It seems like this world is just really chaotic and unwelcoming to many men. And I think that many men resent this and want to either go back to the old world or kind of like shut it down or something like this. But the truth is, we can't pedal back history. We won't be able to go to like this is the world we're dealt, and we need to somehow find our place in it. So the idea of the compass came from this kind of narrative, which is that we need to find our place somehow, and a compass is a pretty good tool to help us find a place. And I
Yeah.
also use the metaphor of a compass because you know how Jordan Peterson, as in his 12 Rules for Life, he says that he is trying to give you a map through chaos.
Mm.
I think that Jordan Peterson is really great at identifying the problems that guys are having.
Hmm.
I just don't think he's great at offering solutions. I think that his solutions are very often very outdated and
Mm.
just do not really befit the world as it is right now. And this is the metaphor that I was trying to use as well. I wrote this text, Don't Trust an Old Man's Map. And the idea is that maps go out of date. You print a map, and in 20 years' time, things have changed. And
Exactly.
this is what happened, I think, with Jordan Peterson. And I like the idea of the compass better because, the compass will always show you the right direction.
And the compass has been around for a long time too.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
In preparation for this, I listened to quite a few of your episodes as well, and I just wanted to also say I'm really appreciative of the fact that you're actually doing things that help men, be more aware of their mental states and emotions and everything else. And there's a great quote from Bell Hooks. I don't know if you've read her.
No.
She's one of those feminists who are always like accused of liking men too much. And she had a fantastic line saying that men will not learn to love unless someone teaches them to love, or unless we give them scripts on how to love, something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about this while listening to your podcast, because I think that this is exactly it. It's like, how are people meant to know how to do things if nobody tells them?
That's
And I
right.
think that you're doing a good job of trying to help them and tell them.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. It means a lot to me, Simon. Thanks so
Of
much.
course.
Well, Simon, I really appreciate you taking the time. I mean, you have your wealth of knowledge and this man's compass. Are guys able to join this and join your discussion, or what's the process here?
Absolutely. So right now, I'm basically trying to publish various text and videos on various platforms. So
Mm-hmm.
you can follow me on Medium, you can follow me on Substack, or you can watch the videos on YouTube as well. And in all of those places, there's the built-in discussion tools. So if you would like to have a discussion there, I would very much welcome this. I am planning right now to expand this a bit and potentially start either a Discord channel or maybe a Slack or something like this. That would be more kind of a community-based thing. I will definitely update you when this happens. Right now, I'm in the process of working this out.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure all that contact information is in our show notes, and hopefully we'll cross paths again and get updated on all the things that you're doing. Any last words you'd like to share with us, Simon, before we part?
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to encourage every man who is listening to this to just be kind to yourself and don't feel horrible when you make mistakes. Maybe this way. I think it's so common for men to feel like they need to be perfect out of the box. Like any mistake you make is just a proof that you're not man enough or lesser than or somehow unworthy or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, no, mistakes are human. We're all imperfect beings. And it only means that we can improve. And I think that if you focus on finding better ways to improve and to train your virtues, as Aristotle would say,
Mm-hmm.
then you will end up on top. And it is a much better way to live. Yeah.
Some great words of wisdom there. Simon Fokt, I appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work. I wish you continued success, and hopefully our paths will pass again.
I really appreciate your work as well. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to any future meetings again. Yes.
And that will do it for this bonus episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the conversation about modern masculinity with Dr. Simon Fokt episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. Thank you for listening. Once again, thanking my guest, Simon Fokt. His website is simonfokt.org. That's Simon, F-O-K-T, by the way, simonfokt.org. You'll find links to Simon's contact information in the show notes. Now, coming up on the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, we'll get into Artie's story and how he learned about the one thing that put the nail in the coffin of his marriage. It's a sign that all of us in relationships should be aware of. What is it, you may ask? Well, you'll have to listen to the next episode to find out. The answer just might surprise you. Please join me for The Relationship Killer, a good sign your relationship could be over episode. Now, as always, if you have a comment or suggestion or idea for the show, if there's something going on in your relationship you need help with, maybe you want to collaborate with me, be a guest on the show, or just want to contact me, simply go to my website where you can email me or set up a free call. Go to menonthepathtolove.com. And when you're there, go ahead and download my free cheat sheet, 5 ways to communicate better in relationship. You can do it right there on my homepage at menonthepathtolove.com. And if you know anyone you think might get something out of listening to this podcast, please share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.